It's Friday, August 7th, and here's what you need to know by noon. American employers cut jobs last month, and the report came in weaker than every single forecast economist submitted. Plus, Iran has put a price on the Strait of Hormuz, and it's not a small one. And a dozen states have had their water systems broken into, while nobody in the federal government will say who did it. We start with the jobs number, because it touches the most people. The Labor Department reported this morning that non-farm payrolls fell by 23,000 in July, against expectations among economists surveyed by Reuters of a gain of 80,000. What makes that more than an ordinary miss is the range of those forecasts. The most pessimistic economist in the survey still expected 10,000 jobs added, so the actual figure came in below every single estimate, and nobody had the direction right. The revisions are worse than the headline, because the Labor Department also marked down the 2 months before it. May was cut by 66,000 jobs, and June by 37,000, which means, in the government's own phrasing, that employment in May and June combined is 103,000 lower than it previously reported. So this is not one bad month. It is a slower spring and early summer than anyone believed at the time, followed by a July that went backwards. The unemployment rate fell to 4.1% from 4.2%, and we want to be careful with that because of how it happened. The share of adults working or looking for work has dropped 0.7 of a point since January, and the unemployment rate only counts people who are actively looking. So when people give up looking, they leave the arithmetic entirely, and the rate can fall while the job market underneath it gets worse. Inside the report, the number of people on temporary layoff rose by 153,000. Local government education shed 50,000 jobs, and retail lost 19,000. Healthcare was the one clear bright spot, adding 22,000. Here's what makes this different from an ordinary weak jobs report. Normally, when hiring stalls like this, you would expect the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates to help. As of this morning, the futures market puts the odds of a cut at the Fed's September meeting at 0. Not low, but 0.0%. With a 56% chance the Fed holds and a 44% chance it raises rates instead. That is the war arriving in your mortgage rate. Oil is above $80 a barrel because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Expensive oil pushes inflation up, and pushing inflation down is the Fed's job. So the Fed is looking at a weakening job market and an inflation problem at once, and the tool that would fix the first makes the second worse. That is why a report this week did not put a single rate cut on the board, which brings us to the strait itself. Yesterday on this program, we said that nobody has to forbid a crossing. They only have to make it cost enough. Iran has now done both. According to Iranian state media and Iran's foreign ministry, Tehran and Oman have a draft framework for reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Oman has not commented, and we want that stated plainly, because almost everything known about these terms comes from the Iranian side. The terms, as reported, are these. Ships linked to the United States and Israel would be barred outright. Countries Iran says caused it damage would face restrictions until they pay compensation, and every other commercial vessel would pay a toll calculated as a share of what its cargo is worth. Reuters reports the figure under discussion is 3 to 7% of declared cargo value, with Iran pushing for 5 to 7 and Oman proposing 3, while the United States opposes any fee to Iran at all, and Gulf states say any payment would have to be strictly voluntary. Let's put a number on that, and we can use a real ship because one made the crossing yesterday. A very large crude carrier called the Nissos Kea went through the strait on Thursday carrying about 2 million barrels of Basra crude loaded in Iraq. Priced at Brent this morning, around $83.50 a barrel, a cargo that size is worth roughly $167 million. So a 7% toll on it would come to about $11.5 million. Now add the number we gave you yesterday. because war risk insurance on a voyage like that runs about $21 million. Put the toll on top of the insurance, and you are at roughly $32 million to move one shipload of oil before anyone has paid for a drop of fuel or a single member of the crew. And here's the detail that undercuts the whole announcement. The framework would not automatically reopen the waterway. We told you yesterday that the only number that would settle this is whether the route moves more ships. And we have that answer now. According to Kepler data reported by Reuters, 33 vessels went through the strait from Monday to Thursday this week. The week before, it was 50. Before the war, it was 130 to 140 a day. The deal advanced, and the traffic fell. Two more things from that same data, and they tell you who believes in this. Iraq's state oil marketer has been discounting its Basra crude by close to $30 a barrel to get buyers to load there. Chinese and Indian refiners went looking for ships this week to go and collect it. Not one vessel has been booked, because the ship owners will not go. We also owe you a clarification on the tankers. Yesterday we reported the Wafa struck off Yanbu as the 8th Saudi tanker targeted since the blockade began, and said to watch for a 9th. But the 9th already existed when we said it, because the Houthi spokesman had claimed 2 ships in the same announcement, the Wafa in the northern Red Sea, and the Daisy in the Gulf of Aden. Both remain claims, with no independent confirmation and no damage assessment. And there is a problem with the toll that has nothing to do with whether anyone agrees to it. Industry sources told Reuters the arrangement is not easily workable in the first place, because American sanctions and the insurance clauses written into shipping contracts make paying Iran directly very hard to actually do. This may be a fee that ships cannot pay even if their owners want to. Iran's chief negotiator, Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, described the American approach this way. Quote, "Massive attack coming. Wait, never mind. They want to negotiate." That, he said, is theater diplomacy on loop. There is one more story today, and what makes it a story is what nobody will say. Water utilities in at least a dozen states have been broken into, with the attackers going after the programmable controllers that run the plants, changing passwords to lock operators out, and changing the equipment's network addresses so it could not be reached. The result was boil water notices in treatment plants run by hand, and in Minnesota alone, more than 30 community water systems were affected. First, the thing you actually want to know, there's no indication that any water supply was unsafe to drink. Michigan's Environmental Communications Director, Dale George, said all systems continued to operate safely and that there were no known impacts posing a public health concern. Now, who did it? Where the honest answer is that no one knows publicly. The FBI and the Environmental Protection Agency have confirmed the incidents, but neither has attributed them to anybody. And the head of the Federal Cyber Agency has spoken about threat actors without naming a country. Anonymous sources in several news reports have pointed at Iran, and Iran is certainly capable of it. But pointing is not proving, and no agency has stood behind that on the record. The president offered a different answer entirely. Asked who was behind it, he said, quote, "You know who's behind it? Minnesota, because they're grossly incompetent." He provided no evidence for that either. So we will leave it where the evidence leaves it. A dozen states were breached. The water is safe, and the United States government has not told its citizens who did it. To the markets, which closed Thursday, before this morning's jobs report, the Dow fell 464 points, or 0.8%, to 53,885, while the S&P 500 slipped about 0.2, and the Nasdaq finished nearly flat. Brent crude climbed almost 4% on the day, and gold rose about 1.5%. Quickly, the rest of the file. In Michigan, whose primary we covered Wednesday and settled Thursday, the president attacked Democratic Senate nominee Abdul El-Sayed this week. El Sayed faces Republican Mike Rogers in November. The Senate confirmed Dr. Erica Schwartz as director of the CDC by 51 to 44, filling a post vacant for more than a year during the country's largest measles outbreak in 35 years. And in Europe, Austria broke its national heat record twice in 2 days, while the Danube has fallen low enough that a nuclear plant had to shut down for lack of cooling water. What to watch? 3 things. Whether Oman says anything at all about a deal its partner has already described in detail. Whether a single ship owner takes a rock up on that $30 discount, because that is the number that tells you whether anyone believes the strait is reopening. And the Federal Reserve in September, where the market currently sees no chance at all of the rate cut a morning like this one would normally produce. That's the file. We'll be here tomorrow.